This week I want to take you behind the scenes of a music video that I shot recently. It was an experience, full of last minute disasters and all on a low budget. Here's what happened. This project started months ago when I was approached to make a music video. After a couple of meetings with the artist, we were talking about making something pleasant but also melancholy, something that leaves the audience space to connect the dots. It made me think of a couple that I knew who were in different countries during their pregnancy. This image of a husband only seeing his wife's pregnancy scan through a video call really stood out to me, and that was the spark that kicked off the development of the story. I then drew from my own memories of being in a long-distance relationship, combined with hearing and thinking about what it must be like to be separated in such a exciting and crucial time. I thought a lot about when the story should start and finish, and what conflicts and emotions might be connected to this scenario. Now, I don't want to spoil the whole video, so let's skip forward to when we started filming before I say too much. The musician had access to an empty house we could film in, so we shot some silhouette footage of him there, as well as setting the main filming date just 1 week later. I hired a first AD to come down from London and listed a casting call on Star Now for someone to play the husband's character. After seeing Edmund's showreel, I knew that he was our strongest choice, and I was really relieved to get everything sorted at such short notice. But then I got a very troubling email. The artist said he had to cancel the entire project. I called him the next day to see if there was a workaround. He just said it was nothing that I did and it was completely out of his control. Yeah, so I had people coming down from London to shoot, and yeah, we had nowhere to film. And more crucially, we didn't have any music for the music video. According to our contract, I didn't need to refund the 30% deposit that the musician had paid, but that left me with an important decision. Do I spend my own money to make up the rest of the budget and quickly try and make the shoot work, as well as finding another band who like the video concept? Or do I just cancel everything? Well, I obviously still wanted to make the video, and I do quite enjoy working under pressure. So in one of my most hectic work days in the last few years, I started searching for artists and songs while developing my ideas for the story, and also trying to find an Airbnb that allowed us to film inside. One musician showed interest, so I ended up quickly making a concept treatment, writing down my ideas and some frame mock-ups, as well as film references. It was really helpful pitching the idea to a fresh person, because it forced me to collect and clarify my ideas. And so even though the story wasn't right for the artist in the end, I'm really, really glad that I made the treatment. Eventually I did find an Airbnb that we could film in, but that meant I first had to film the wife's side of the video calls, and again on a budget. So we just basically used what we had available, which you'll see became a theme for this project. Tiara, who was playing the wife, said we could film at her place wearing her clothes as costume, which definitely saved some money. I just had to buy a pregnancy bump. I then gave her a brief outline of what I was looking for before calling her for real with my laptop, and we spoke while I recorded my screen. I did have a list of shots and little moments that I wanted to get, but I didn't actually show her that. Instead, I just kind of led the conversation in the right direction until I got what I was hoping for. Obviously, there was a lot of room for improvisation, and it was actually really helpful kind of leaving things open so she could incorporate her own ideas of what she could be doing while she was speaking. And she even had ideas about setting up the background and doing the production design. So it was really, really valuable. A couple of days later, it's the morning of the main shoot, and we still hadn't secured a song to use for the video, but I was committed now. Sonja, the first AD, arrived, along with Jack, to film the behind the scenes, and Edmund, who was playing the husband. We started setting up and chatting about the day ahead, and then started with one of the video call scenes. It went something like this. We'd watch a 30-second sequence from the wife's video call while Edmund performed his side of the conversation. Then I'd give my feedback. And this is where casting is so important. I really didn't feel like I had to coax a good performance out of him. Often the first take was great, and I'd either have one note or just ask him to kind of save that idea for a later scene where it'd fit better, that kind of thing. Once I was happy with his side of the call, we'd record his face shot on the laptop's camera, and then I dropped that footage into the corner of the wife's footage so that it looked like he was really speaking to her. Lastly, he would watch that video while reacting to it again while I filmed him and the screen together. One of my favourite ways to save time and money is being strategic with the light from windows. So we staged all of the daylight scenes with that in mind. There were even blinds that I could use to modify and direct the light. These frames that you can see now were shot only using the natural window light, which is very budget and time friendly. I have to say I was so glad that before the shoot I'd sent Sonja a really detailed list of a bunch of tasks that she could do. Because during the shoot I already had a million things to think about, and it was great for her to be able to get stuff done without me. In between, I'd ask her to set up the background or the lights for the next scene, or maybe even clear up the previous one. I was so glad to have her around on set. I'm still learning to communicate clearly and to make sure I delegate enough tasks, but I do think it's getting easier with practice. As it started to get dark, we made the most of the lovely blue light at dusk, and then we moved on to the nighttime shots. Filming the video call conversations from all the different angles did take longer than I'd expected. So by the time we were eating dinner, I had to wolf down some pizza while exporting the next video call. And the last half hour of the shoot was a bit hectic. The shots were fairly simple, but we really only had time for one take and was setting up everything very quickly. The last scene of the day was reshooting the silhouette footage. And rather than using a green screen, which requires a lot of time to set up and also some equipment, I decided to shoot against a white wall which I could overlay the footage on top of, as long as I could keep the light away from the actor. It wasn't easy in such a small space, but we got it in the end and only overran by 15 minutes. The shoot felt like a success. Over the course of the day, the ideas had kind of developed and changed based on the kind of things that we had around us, and that was actually quite a fun, fluid way to film. But with the shoot done and the deadline imminent, it meant we really had to knuckle down and try and contact a musician. We started calling and emailing record labels to see if they could put in touch with musicians, but it wasn't until I spoke to Lewis from Musicvine that I got a good artist recommendation that fit with what we were looking for. They were able to put me in touch with Westlake from the Great Albatross, and their track Man of Dust was absolutely perfect. It was nice and calm, and it had that balance of wistful melancholy that really fit the story like a glove. We had a really nice conversation on the phone when I pitched the idea, and by coincidence, quite a few of the elements from the story really resonated with Wesley's life. So I sent him the treatment the next day after adding some of the real frames we'd shot, and he was very gracious about responding to my emails quickly. Over the weekend, and literally 2 days before the video launch, we were able to sign a contract that said that we both had non-exclusive rights to the song and the video, which meant I could finally really sink my teeth into the edit. By this point, I'd already made an 8-minute version of the story, but cutting it down to 3 minutes was clearly going to be a challenge. I had the different angles of each video call synced up, so I then marked the points on his or her side of the call that seemed both authentic and had something that drove the story forward, either emotionally or by conveying important information. Then, and this is the crucial part, I made a copy of the project, so I could start just hacking away at it, ruthlessly deleting things while safe in the knowledge that I could always go back to the 8-minute project if I needed to. Now, I really wanted a shot of an aeroplane taking off while the character is thinking about the distance between him and his wife and the oceans between them. But with the limited time and money, I'd already decided that I could use stock footage for these sequences. And so this episode is sponsored by Storyblocks Video. They saved us from needing permission to film on a runway or needing to travel to the beach for this shot. I ended up actually finding a bunch of shots that I could use from their membership library subscription, which gives you unlimited access to lots of footage, much of which is 4K, and it's all available for commercial and personal use. I downloaded plenty of shots to try out in the timeline, just dropping it under the silhouette footage that I'd graded and cropped, before changing the blend mode to multiply so that the white becomes transparent. Then, using the stock footage and some of my own stuff I'd shot, I was able to create these sequences of his memories and thoughts, and I even found the ultrasound footage that I'd been thinking of from the very beginning of the project. So by the time the video was finished, I had 6 different copies of the project, each timeline more refined than the previous, and I showed those later versions to a few people, including Wesley from the Great Albatross, of course, who had some really valuable feedback. It's kind of tough to talk about the editing process without just ruining the entire video, but I would just say that overall, being open to changing the order of things and even removing entire sequences really did pay off. Now, I love colour grading, so lastly I do just want to quickly show a couple of before and afters, mostly just because I find it so satisfying. As usual, my grading wasn't particularly fancy, mostly just making sure it wasn't too red or green and making things darker. But if you're interested in this stuff, if you look on my channel, I've made plenty of other videos that go into detail about colour grading. So I think this project taught me a lot about dealing with financial and time-based problems. Whether we were putting stuff on ironing boards and books, or using beds to get the tripod up high, bouncing the light off the walls for this shot instead of using expensive diffusion, or even just using costumes, asking the actors to bring a couple of outfits of their own clothes. It really was about finding cheaper ways to do things. And as always, it was a chance to practice creating characters, getting ideas across visually, choosing what to film and what not to film. Of course, I would have loved to have more money to spend, to hire a DP or a gaffer so I could focus on the actors rather than lighting. I'm pretty sure that would have made the shoot easier, but I guess there's no guarantee that that would have made the final product better. The one thing I can say for sure though, is nothing quite gets me moving or makes me focus as intensely as having some pressure and some problems to solve. That's a guarantee. So if you'd like to see the finished music video, please do click here. I'm very curious to hear what you think of it. And if you want to check out Storyblocks, they've got a link in the description. So that's it for this week, and I'll see you next time.